The hum of the ship's engines filled the darkened cockpit as Captain Daniel Hayes leaned back in his seat, staring out at the vast expanse of space. Stars streaked past the window, a blur of light against the ink-black void. For a moment, he let his mind wander, free from the endless cycles of intergalactic missions, trade deals, and the occasional run-in with pirates. Space travel had its beauty, its peace, but it also came with its own set of peculiarities. And today he was about to face one of the most unusual encounters of his career. The ship's intercom crackled to life, snapping Hayes out of his reverie. "Captain Hayes, we've just entered the Androsian system. The princess's representatives are expecting us. Prepare for landing." The words echoed through the room, yet Daniel couldn't shake the nagging thought that something was off. Androsians. He had heard of them before, an ancient, proud alien race. Warriors, diplomats, explorers. And from what he knew, the Androsians were known for one thing more than anything else: their marriage customs. In particular, their royal family's peculiar tradition of choosing a spouse based on trials. He didn't have time to think much about it. This was, after all, just another diplomatic mission. Or so he hoped. Meet the captain. Captain Daniel Hayes wasn't exactly the kind of man who could be easily pinned down. His reputation in the Galactic Exploration League was built on a series of daring missions, calm under pressure, and an uncanny ability to talk his way out of situations that others might consider impossible. He wasn't much for politics, though. Politics had a way of muddying the waters, complicating simple things. He preferred action. Decisions made in the heat of the moment, not after endless rounds of council meetings and formalities. His crew, a ragtag group of seasoned explorers, was eager for this new mission. A new planet, new life forms, and possibly new resources to expand Earth's reach. That was the hope. The reality? A lot of bureaucracy, endless reports, and political scheming. "Prepare the landing gear," Hayes ordered, swiping the holographic display to confirm their coordinates. The ship began its descent, and the tension in the cockpit grew. Everyone knew the stakes. Earth was sending their best to establish a treaty, to create alliances in a galaxy that was growing increasingly unstable. But alliances with the Androsians were never easy. See, enter the alien princess. The moment the ship touched down on the rocky, storm-worn surface of Gliese 724F, Daniel couldn't shake the sense that something monumental was about to unfold. The Androsians were nothing if not dramatic. Their capital city, Androsar, loomed in the distance, its massive spires rising above a sea of gray clouds, while colossal stone statues lined the streets, silent sentinels that seemed to watch over the kingdom with an unblinking gaze. There was power here, history, and an air of finality to everything. The Androsians had been a mighty force in the galaxy for millennia. As Daniel disembarked with his crew, a hush fell over the royal procession that awaited them. At the center of it all stood Princess Alara. There was no mistaking her presence. She stood tall, regal, with silver-blue skin that shimmered like starlight. Her deep violet eyes regarded Daniel with both curiosity and caution, a combination that left him feeling a little off balance. She wore intricate robes of flowing silks, the patterns a reflection of her house, of her lineage. Her beauty was undeniable, but there was something else in her gaze, a sharpness, a challenge. This was no delicate flower waiting to be saved. This was a leader in her own right. And she made it clear that she wouldn't be treated as anything less. "Captain Hayes," she said, her voice carrying effortlessly across the plaza, "I trust you've come prepared for more than just pleasantries. Dean the princess's problem." The air grew thick as Hayes stood face to face with the princess. Her presence was commanding, and for the first time in a long while, he wasn't sure how to proceed. She wasn't like the leaders he had met before, pragmatic, formal, all business. She was intimidating in the most unexpected way. "We understand that Earth wishes to enter an alliance with us, Captain," Princess Alara continued, her tone still as cool as ice. "But as you know, I am the heir to the Androsian throne, and our traditions run deep. We do not enter alliances with just anyone." Hayes nodded, trying to stay calm, though he had heard enough about Androsian customs to know where this was going. The Androsians did not marry for love or convenience. No, they married to strengthen their empire, to create bonds of power and influence. It was a centuries-old practice. A practice that often involved trials designed to test the worthiness of a potential spouse. I'm aware, Hayes replied, keeping his voice steady. But we came here for more than just marriage ceremonies. We're here to forge a diplomatic relationship. One that will benefit both our peoples. But Alara wasn't having it. Forging an alliance is one thing, Captain. But my marriage, that is another matter entirely. The surprising twist. The diplomatic talks began, but something was off. As the hours wore on, it became increasingly clear that the princess wasn't interested in the formalities of these negotiations. Her gaze kept returning to Daniel with an intensity that left him unsure of how to interpret it. He was finally called to the royal chambers, a massive marble hall with towering columns and an intricate ceiling that depicted Androsian history. He was greeted not by Alara's usual cold demeanor, but by a surprising, almost amused smile. "You're taking me as your wife." "Really?" The words were spoken with such force that Hayes nearly choked on his own breath. He blinked in shock. "Wait, what?" But there was no mistaking it. Alara was standing before him, a mischievous grin on her face, her arms crossed. She was playing with him. You're here for the trial, Captain," she said, her voice taking on an edge of amusement. "But what you didn't know is that the trial involves choosing a marriage partner. And it seems..." She took a step forward, her eyes gleaming. "You are it?" Hayes stood frozen, his mind struggling to process what she was saying. This wasn't just about diplomacy. This wasn't about alliances. This was something entirely different, and suddenly the last thing he expected had just landed squarely on his shoulders. The real crisis. It was clear now that this mission was going to be nothing like he imagined. What started as a simple diplomatic visit was quickly spiraling into a chaotic mess of royal customs, political intrigue, and, perhaps most dangerously, an unexpected and reluctant marriage proposal from the princess herself. And with every second that passed, Daniel couldn't help but wonder, what exactly had he gotten himself into? "Don't just stand there, move." Captain Daniel Hayes barked, his boots pounding against the cold stone floors of the Androsian palace. His crew scrambled to keep up, their faces a mix of excitement and apprehension. His own stomach churned with a feeling he couldn't quite shake, the sense that something was about to go wrong, or at the very least something unexpected was about to happen. The grand entrance of the Androsian royal palace loomed ahead, its marble columns towering like silent sentinels, each one carved with ancient symbols. The air buzzed with the hum of anticipation, but Hayes barely noticed. His mind was elsewhere, still processing the strange interaction with Princess Alara, the coldness of her first meeting with him, followed by that cryptic, almost teasing question that now refused to leave his thoughts. "You're taking me as your wife." "Really?" The words echoed in his mind like a forgotten memory clawing at the back of his consciousness. How was he supposed to respond to something like that? He wasn't here to get married. He wasn't here for any of this. Yet somehow the princess's words had cut deeper than he expected, and he felt like the proverbial fly trapped in a web. But there was no turning back now. Entering the lion's den. The door to the royal court swung open, revealing a room that could only be described as fit for a queen, or an empire. The floor was covered in lavish, woven tapestries depicting scenes of Androsian history. Massive chandeliers, shaped like crystalline constellations, hung from the vaulted ceiling, casting an ethereal glow on the proceedings below. But it wasn't the room's grandeur that struck Hayes most. It was the palpable weight of expectation. The Androsian court was watching them, every pair of eyes trained on his every move. He squared his shoulders, trying to project confidence, though every part of him wanted to bolt. This wasn't his element. He had led missions into hostile territories, negotiated with warlords and bargained with pirates. But here, in this room full of powerful, calculating beings, he felt small. The stakes had suddenly risen exponentially. He wasn't just trying to establish an alliance anymore. He was in a strange new world, full of rules he didn't understand, and at the center of it all was Princess Alara, watching him with a knowing smile. Before he could fully compose himself, Alara strode into the room, her silver blue skin shimmering with a faint glow. Her robes swirled behind her as she moved, almost as if the fabric itself was a living extension of her will. The royal entourage followed, but none dared to speak. The princess was the center of attention as always. "Captain Hayes," she called out, her voice cutting through the murmur of the court like a blade. "I trust you're ready for the trial?" The word trial hung in the air like an unseen threat. Daniel froze, the weight of it sinking in. Trial? He had been briefed on Androsian customs. Marriage trials were not uncommon, but he hadn't anticipated one being thrust upon him. His mind raced as he tried to piece together what was happening. But before he could gather his thoughts, Elara continued. "Today you face more than mere diplomacy. Today you must prove your worth to not only me but to the entire Androsian Empire. If you are found wanting, our alliance ends. And if you fail me, well, let's just say our histories will diverge in ways you might not fully understand." The court seemed to hold its breath. The princess was always cryptic, but these words, "prove your worth, fail me," suggested more than a political game. Hayes had no illusions about the significance of this moment. This wasn't just about a handshake or a few words of agreement. This was about power, control. And somehow he had been swept into the middle of it. "I'm ready for whatever you throw my way, princess," he said, trying to sound confident. But inside, his gut was tight with uncertainty. He didn't know what trial he was about to face, and that scared him more than he was willing to admit. "Seat the trial of the heart." Elara didn't immediately respond. Instead, she turned to the court, raising her hand. The crowd fell silent as she gestured toward the massive ornate door at the far end of the room. The doors creaked open with an almost theatrical slowness, revealing a vast arena beyond. An arena where many Androsians had fought their most important battles, both physical and mental. "Follow me," Elara commanded, her tone leaving no room for hesitation. Daniel exchanged a look with his crew who had followed him into the room. They looked as confused as he felt, but none of them dared to ask questions. They were here as witnesses, not participants. And as he moved toward the door, he couldn't help but wonder if they had any idea what was about to unfold. The princess led them into the arena, where a large circular stage had been set up in the center. Surrounding it were bleachers filled with spectators, their eyes trained on the center. The air was thick with anticipation, and Hayes couldn't help but feel the weight of it pressing down on him. "What is this?" Hayes asked, his voice low but laced with suspicion. The atmosphere was beginning to feel more like an execution than a trial. "Do you know the story of the Androsian bond?" Elara asked, her voice distant as she surveyed the stage. "No," Hayes replied. "I haven't heard it. It's a tradition," she began, "that binds the future leader of our people with the strength of their heart. It is not enough to rule with power. One must also possess the will to protect and uphold the honor of the empire. The trials test that. And today you will face it." The arena before them was designed like a labyrinth, with various obstacles that required intelligence, physical agility, and emotional endurance. Daniel had been through training exercises before, but this was different. This wasn't just a series of physical trials, it was a test of his character, his ability to connect with the people, and most importantly, his ability to face the princess herself. "You will walk through this labyrinth," Elara explained, "and as you do you must answer 3 questions. Each answer will reveal your worth. Fail any one of them, and you will be removed from this trial, and from our alliance." Daniel's stomach dropped. This wasn't just about strength or strategy, it was about his heart. His instincts. His ability to think on his feet and reveal parts of himself that he had long buried. He could handle anything physical, but what if these questions forced him to reveal a side of himself he didn't want anyone to see? What if he failed? He took a deep breath and squared his shoulders. It was too late to back out now. Dean, the first question. The trial began immediately. Hayes stepped onto the labyrinthine stage, each step bringing him deeper into the maze. The sound of his footsteps echoed off the stone walls as he approached the first of 3 checkpoints. Elara stood in the center of the stage, her gaze sharp as she prepared to ask the first question. "What is it you value most in the universe, Captain Hayes?" she asked, her voice carrying the weight of judgment. For a moment, Daniel stood frozen. What did he value most? Honor? Loyalty? His crew? The future of Earth? Finally he spoke. Freedom, he said, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. I value the freedom to make choices, to explore, to live without being bound by things beyond my control. The ground trembled beneath Captain Daniel Hayes' boots as he stepped deeper into the maze, each step amplifying the low rumble of something far greater than the mere weight of his body on the ancient stone. The arena, with its twisting corridors and looming shadows, felt almost alive, pulsating, watching, waiting for him to slip up. Ilara's question still lingered in his mind, its implications heavier than he was willing to admit. But this was no longer just about him. This trial wasn't simply a game, it was a battlefield. And in this labyrinth, failure was not just a matter of losing an argument, it could mean the collapse of an entire alliance, the end of everything he had worked for. Daniel's breath came faster, the cold stone walls closing in on him, narrowing with every turn he made. Somewhere deep in the labyrinth's bowels, the answer to the next question awaited. And with each passing moment, his sense of unease grew. What would they ask next? Being the shadows of doubt. The first checkpoint had been easy. Too easy. His answer, freedom, had felt true, solid, something he could stand by. But he knew the next question wouldn't be so simple. Ilara was clever, too clever for his own good. He could almost feel her eyes on him, watching from the shadows, waiting for him to slip. What was this really about? Was it just about testing his heart as she had said? Or was there something else at play? Some darker, hidden agenda that he hadn't yet seen? The labyrinth twisted around him, a maze of deception and mental traps, designed to test his very limits. And just as he was about to step forward into another open chamber, a figure emerged from the darkness ahead, tall, imposing, and familiar. It was Ilara. Captain Hayes, she said softly, her voice echoing strangely in the vast empty space. Do you truly believe in freedom? Or is it just a comforting lie you tell yourself to mask your true desires? Her presence felt oppressive, like a cloud descending over the maze. Daniel stopped, his hand instinctively reaching for his communicator, only to realize it wasn't going to work here. There was no signal in this twisted realm. Focus, he told himself. He needed to focus. This wasn't just a physical trial, it was a mental one too. Ilara was forcing him to confront things he didn't want to see. You believe in freedom, but can you answer the real question, Captain? She continued, stepping closer. What would you sacrifice for it? Would you sacrifice everything for a cause you may not even fully understand? Seat the hidden agenda. The air felt thick with tension. Daniel's instincts screamed at him to keep moving, to push through the maze and answer the questions with cold, calculated precision. But Ilara's words gnawed at him like invisible chains. His pulse quickened, not from fear, but from the growing realization that this wasn't just about freedom anymore. It was about control. The truth was, he didn't know what he was fighting for anymore. The stakes had grown higher than a simple diplomatic mission, and the implications of his actions stretched far beyond the immediate horizon. In that moment, something changed within Daniel. The princess wasn't just playing a game. She had power, more power than he had realized, and the labyrinth was more than a test of character. It was a trap. A cunning test of his ability to see beyond the surface, to unravel the carefully constructed illusion that had been woven around him. Tell me, Captain, Ilara continued, her voice cold, do you know who the real enemy is here? You think this trial is about proving your worth, but you are just a pawn in a far larger game, a game that I control. How long will you continue to follow this path blindly? Her words struck him with the force of a slap. He had been so focused on playing by the rules following the trial, believing that it was a mere political game. But now, everything was shifting, warping in his mind. He wasn't just fighting for an alliance. He was fighting for his survival. As the weight of her words settled over him, Daniel's thoughts flashed to the Androsian Empire's history. They had been in a constant state of conflict, a race for dominance with other alien civilizations. The power dynamics here were not like anything he had seen before. And Ilara, it seemed, was the epicenter of that power. This wasn't just about him. The entire fate of his mission, and the future of Earth, could depend on how he played this game. But Ilara had already shifted the rules, and Daniel wasn't sure he knew how to fight back. The turning point. Daniel gritted his teeth, unwilling to show weakness. He couldn't afford to be overwhelmed. Not now. Not when everything was at stake. He stood tall, forcing his gaze to meet Alara's cold eyes. "You're wrong," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos swirling inside him. "I'm not just here for a diplomatic agreement, Princess. I'm here because this is what Earth needs. This alliance is the key to our future, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make it work. But I'm not going to bow to anyone. Not even you." For a moment, there was silence between them, the air so thick with tension it felt like the very walls were listening. Alara didn't flinch, but there was a glimmer of something. Was it amusement? Curiosity? It was hard to tell with her. "You think you understand the stakes?" she asked, her tone suddenly soft, almost sympathetic. "You think you understand what this empire is truly capable of?" She looked around the labyrinth, her eyes flickering with something darker. "This trial, it's not just about you. It's about the future of all of us. If you fail, it won't just be your alliance that crumbles, it will be the very balance of the galaxy itself." Daniel's heart skipped a beat. The weight of her words hit him like a physical blow. The enormity of the task he had taken on suddenly became clear. He had walked into a political minefield, but now he realized it was much bigger than that. "You want to know the truth, Captain?" Alara's voice dropped to a whisper, one that seemed to travel directly into his mind. "The real trial is not whether you can answer my questions. It's whether you're willing to make the hard choice. Will you sacrifice your ideals? Will you give up your precious freedom for something bigger than yourself?" The choice. Daniel stood frozen. There it was, the choice that had been waiting for him all along. The crux of the entire trial. Freedom. Or sacrifice. His mind raced, torn between the two. Alara was offering him something, an opportunity to gain unparalleled power, but at the cost of his personal freedom, his very identity. Could he betray his own values for the greater good? Was he even the right person to make that choice? The labyrinth had become a mirror, reflecting his innermost fears and desires. And as Alara's eyes locked onto his, Daniel understood something fundamental. The true enemy here wasn't some external force. It was the struggle within himself.